Nostalgia from Lichtlaerm Audio on the board today. This is a pretty intense modulation workstation that can do everything from traditional chorus style effects through to absolutely wacky ring modulator, lo-fi vinyl, and doubling effects on here. We'll do a very brief overview of the controls and then dig into some sounds, but I kind of want to take you through this pedal control by control because it can cover so much ground. And if you're somebody who just wants a really fat, lush sounding chorus pedal, this will do it. If you're somebody who wants the ability to make totally wacky sci-fi noises or really junky lo-fi style sounds, it can do that as well. I love what Dan has done with all his previous pedals, so I'm very excited to dig straight into this one. If you want to check it out, the website is linked in the video description. So for now, let's make some noise. If a modulation pedal with more than 2 or 3 controls on it is slightly intimidating, don't fret, because we can think of this pedal as a classic 2 or 3 knob modulation pedal with a couple of customization options on here. So I just want you to start by paying attention to the RPM, the depth, and the mix control on here. This is what you might find on a classic chorus pedal, for example. If you set everything else pretty close to noon on there, you're going to get a really lovely chorus sound out of this. There is the extra Fidelity knob on here, which is going to sweep from a hi-fi to more of a lo-fi kind of broken up, crunchy sound on there. So I'm going to keep that all the way up. You've also got the ability to tap in the rate control over here, which is great in the middle of a performance if you want to go from a really subtle chorus sound to something very wobbly. So at the moment, we are aiming for classic chorus sounds, and then I'll talk about what the other controls do. I am contractually obliged to play this chord, of course. That's just staying on a single waveform and manipulating the rate, the depth, and the mix control on there. You get a whole range of different classic modulation sounds, right? A lot of that sounded like that late 70s fat chorus sound that we all know and love as Rush fans. You could crank up the rate and almost get some kind of rotary or ring modulator sounds out of it. And then with the rate control up quite high with the depth on there and just playing around with the mix control, you can get a vibrato sound or you can get something a little more subtle on there. I really like that. Let's keep these controls cranked up and then play around with the different waveform shapes on here. I will lean into the character with each of them. There's a couple of very wacky style ones and then some very there are some very wacky style effects on there, and there are some more subtle ones as well. So let's have a listen to what that gives us. There's some truly bizarre and fun stuff in there, as well as some just really sweet sounding modulation effects in there. I think that sine wave LFO and the LFO next to it on the selector are great if you want that rotary speaker style sound on there. It's also going to work great for a traditional chorus. So the warp control is the next one I want to get a handle on. This is going to control the core delay time. So turning it all the way down, it's always going to sound like a flanger, like a very low delay time on there. If you crank it up past noon, you'll almost get some slapback style effects. And the way this pedal is designed is it actually pushes the components used way out of their recommended usage zone. So they start to get crunchy and almost kind of crappy sounding, but that has a character all its own. So we'll start by winding this down. There's a definite sweet spot in here if you want a really, really sweet analog style chorus in here. So I don't know, something like this. That is absolutely cooking. So with the warp control, somewhere around 10, 11 o'clock on there, I think that's my preference with that, a slightly shorter delay time on there. As you crank it up though, like I said, you're going to get those kind of pseudo slapback style effects. So let's do just that. We'll start at noon and then slowly push. Cool on there. I like that it almost gives you a surf or rockabilly style sound on there with the depth at minimum. All right, we're finally at it. We're at the fidelity control. Now, this, listening to it, I just assume they're adding like a lo-fi filter to everything, but the way it actually works is the signal goes through the circuit and you've got all these controls over here, but then right at the end, it can be split to a really hi-fi set of components or a really kind of junky lo-fi set of components that are not in spec, but like unbiased transistors and all sorts of just crap, basically. And the fidelity control is a blend control between those on there, which I think is a super unique way to approach this. So let's set up something kind of wacky and almost like broken record style sounding. So one of the more random looking LFO waveforms. you're either listening to that, loving it, and hearing all the potential for use for like destruction loops or soundtracks or just any type of overdub you might want to put on a recording to make it sound a little bit unsettling or have some underscoring happening. Or you might just hear and go, why would I ever want a pedal that makes my guitar sound like that? Well, if you don't want to sound like that, you just crank the fidelity up and happy days. But I love the way they've approached that in there, where it's not just like, a generic bandpass filter or a really extreme low pass filter on there. The fact that they're actually just running it through a bunch of crap parts, I really, really appreciate that type of design on there. Just from a pedal nerd perspective, I'm not really aware of any other pedals deliberately doing that, unless they deliberately do it and it always sounds bad all the time. I like that this can sound so lush and hi-fi on here. For me, being somebody who really likes chorus and flanger style effects, the warp control on there and the waveform selector are perfection in my opinion. Being able to tap in the rate is super cool as well. I would happily use that as a modulation effect live, where I can just tap it in really slowly for like a thickening effect and then a bit faster for like a kind of wobbly character part or something like that. And again, those settings with, I don't know, the rate somewhere just below noon, the warp around 10, 11 o'clock, depth slightly higher than noon on there. Everything else at noon works really, really well. So yeah, Daniel Ringel, you absolute mad dog. You've done it again. One of the most creative pedal designers out there. And also, I just love that this pedal looks so cool. Even the box looks so cool as well. So I'll pop a link in the video description to this one. Thanks to Dan for sending me this pedal so I can make some noise with it. And the whole demo has been with this kind of fat, edge of breakup clean sound. So let's go full chungus now and we'll have a listen to what this does in front of a dirty amp. Thanks for watching. If you want to support my channel, there's links in the video description. Have a great day. Go and play your guitars now. Oh God, that's fun.